What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction. In this one, we have the surprising fact about many London buildings. Before we dive into this, if you guys happen to enjoy, please do not forget to smash that subscribe button. Give the video a thumbs up, and let's find out what's going on with these London buildings.
Anyone who lives in London or comes to London regularly will be familiar with these yellow bricks that we call yellow London stocks. Now, stocks are called stocks because they were basically put into moulds called stocks, which could be made of wood or iron or something like that, and the bricks were just moulded in that way, each one by hand. Now, a lot of people will think about bricks as being red and wonder why these particular bricks are this colour. Well, it's a combination of things, really. One is that they used a very low quality clay. So rather than digging deep for the clay, they just basically used the clay that was blown in from the Ice Age and deposited around the London area on top of the better quality clay, if you like. And this was called brick earth. And really what you could do is just scoop it up from the ground and make it into stock moulds and fire it up, and you got yourself a brick. But to keep the brick together, to bind it together a little bit, they also used quite a lot of chalk, quite a lot of lime in it. And what they also did is they added ash and bits of coal and anything they could find like that, and that's why you get all these black flecks in the bricks.
These bricks are just thrown together bricks, low quality bricks. I got you.
The ash and the dust and all the bits of coal debris and wood ash and everything else that went into making these bricks that they mixed in with that low quality clay and the chalk, that was collected from houses which were burning coal and burning wood and everything else, and it was collected by men who were called dustmen, and they carried this off to the brickmakers and sold it for a penny or whatever they got for it. When they fired these bricks up, they didn't do it in kilns. They were just scooped up from the ground around here, and once they'd been formed and laid out in a field to dry for a while, they were just stacked up in piles, sometimes 60,000, sometimes 250,000 bricks, and in between the piles, in the kind of tunnels, if you like, that they built, they would load those with coal and wood and anything they could find to make a fire. Now, one thing that kept the temperature low in these clamps was the fact that they used a lot of green wood, and that added to it, and it produced a kind of steam, plus the fact that the clay wasn't always dried out. In theory, they dug the clay, put it into the moulds, turned them out of the stocks, if you like, or the moulds, and laid it out in the fields to dry. But as you know, in England, you can never rely on the weather. And if it turned wet and they needed the bricks, they were going to put those wet bricks into the clamps and fire them up. And so basically what you got was almost like an autoclave. They weren't just firing the bricks, they were steaming them. Now, one effect this had was that you got a lot of steam, so therefore you got a lot of airways in it. The bricks were quite porous because they weren't so dense. And although you might think that was really a bad thing, actually it turned out to be a blessing, because it meant that although they could absorb water readily, they could also release it, which is why you often find that you don't get spalling on these bricks. Even though they've been repointed with strong sand and cement, it doesn't actually cause any frost damage on the bricks themselves. If we look more closely at these bricks, you'll see all the little black flecks and impurities in them. And they were once considered, actually, these are very nice quality bricks.
I was going to say, I can see it from a distance. We ain't got to get closer. But him saying, like, these bricks are, like, it is awesome. He said, although they can absorb water, they can also release it, which is a good thing. So the process they went about with these bricks, I guess they got the leftover clay, or the clay that was blocking the way to the good clay. They figured out some makeshift, put whatever together in order to make this brick and keep it together. Okay, depending on that British weather. So some of these bricks had to be steamed in order to dry out, and this is what you ended up with. They may not be the best looking of bricks, but at the end of the day, it seems like they serve their purpose.
These were used on the facade. I reckon if you went round the back and the side of these houses, you would see where they've used the lower quality bricks. So although these bricks were a lower quality, they were abundant They could just dig the earth up from around wherever they were building, build the clamps, not the kilns, the clamps that they fired the bricks in, and then just make the bricks and move on. And by that process, they would then build in the next field and then dig out a bit more of this brick earth. And in that way, London spread, the urban sprawl began. So this building was built in 1764, and you can see the very uneven bricks. These would be the real deal. You can see some of them are black, and those would have been charred and coal dust, but at some point these would have been dirty colour. So they've been cleaned up quite a lot. You can see around the windows, try to put in a bit of variety and a bit of feature. So here you can see some perfect examples of London stocks. But you'll notice that they do change from one building to another. You can see these ones are the old ones with the black fleck in them, and then you move around. Some of them have been cleaned, which is deceptive, but there's clearly a difference between those bricks in that place over there and these ones here. And the reason for that is, well, basically Adolf Hitler, because everybody knows about the London Blitz and the fact that there was intense bombing. If you walk along a street, you can see the missing teeth, if you like, where buildings were destroyed. And in some cases, they were put back in the style, as in this case. Beautiful continuation, lovely looking buildings. And in some cases they weren't. In some cases they just had to get things built. But I remember, because I grew up here in the 1950s, I can remember one of the highlights, one of the things that we really enjoyed doing was playing in the bombed out buildings on the old bomb sites. You could go up into these buildings and entire sides of the building have been blown away, and you'd be standing there 3 stories up looking down, and nobody bothered about anything in those days. That was just kids playing. Nobody told you not to.
That's wild. Times back then and times today are completely different. You definitely will get told not to get down from there. Don't be playing up there. But times have changed, of course. And so some of these buildings, I guess, had to be rebuilt, of course, after the Blitz. And some of these, I guess, stood the test of time and have still been around. And you can see the difference in these bricks. But in the ability to mass produce bricks, I think that's very important when, like he said, things needed to be built. Like, you got to build things quickly. And with these lower quality bricks, he said you can almost dig up some earth wherever you're around and create these lower quality bricks. So it makes them very, very easy to create and mass produce. And that's why you have a lot of buildings built with these.
So you can see the black flecks in these bricks, and this, to my mind, is what gives them such character. They're by no means perfect. And you will find that they've cleaned up. These have been cleaned up. And so a lot of that black that we saw was really just atmospheric pollution. So here, these are considerably darker, these bricks, but you can see, if you look, if you scratch the face of one of them, you would see that they were yellow underneath. And this is entirely due to pollution. This is entirely due to the fact that London was a very filthy place for many, many years with the coal fires and everything else. And they just got black. Over the years, the bricks got black. Now, if you look at Downing Street, which was actually designed by Sir Christopher Wren, the buildings in Downing Street are black with white pointing. And they were originally made from yellow London stocks. And the reason that they're black now is because when they cleaned them up, people didn't like them. They looked at it and they thought, well, that doesn't look like Downing Street. That doesn't look like the iconic buildings that we know. So what they then did was to paint the bricks to make them black again, which is crazy, because once you paint bricks, you've got to keep painting bricks. That's the advice to the Prime Minister. Never paint your bricks.
That is wild, because that paint at some point is going to come off, and then you're going to have to repaint, and then repaint, and then repaint, and then repaint. That one. Yeah, that advice should have been taken.
Imagine that a humble brick could create much controversy, could you? But there are people that dislike yellow London stocks with a passion. And there are other people like me who just love them. And I suppose one of the reasons why I love them, I suppose you could say, is because I was born just here and I was surrounded by these buildings, these tenement buildings, beautiful wrought iron balconies, and it was yellow London stocks everywhere. So they are my earliest memory. And the place I was brought up in the early days anyway, until we moved out of London into the boring council estates. The place I was brought up was Northampton Buildings, which they demolished. And I thought they were going to build something else there, but they didn't. What they did is this. They left it as an open space. This is now called Spa Fields, and this was basically where I used to live back in the day. Is it an improvement? I suppose it is, really. So here's a great example of the old red rubbers and the way that they haven't stood the test of time at all. All down here you can see the degradation, bit of frost damage. They pointed it all up. But over here you can see the old yellow London stocks. These walls would have been here when I was a kid, but it looks like these are probably salvaged. They may have even been salvaged from when they knocked down those buildings that I lived in. And that's what happened quite a lot, is that people reuse the bricks, and it's unlikely that any quality houses would have been built using second-hand stocks, but certainly extensions and the odd brick wall here, and you know, all sorts of bits and pieces where people have added and changed buildings, maybe bricked in a window. They would have used the second-hand bricks, and the second-hand bricks are now very valuable indeed. I mean, 2-3 quid a time, you know, they just pick them up, the guys go through the rubbish picking them out and selling them. So what you find in various parts of London is that they've got these little areas, these little gardens. This one unfortunately is gated off, so we can't get in there, but you can see that down there is a lower point, and just up here you can see the houses through the trees. The reason that you've got this hole in the ground, if you like, is because this is where the clay was dug out to build these houses. And when they'd finished digging out the clay, they didn't fill it in to build more houses. They just moved on and left that area there. And eventually it was turned into a very nice little gardens. All over the place you'll see that where they've cut the railings off, just sawing them off. These would have been lovely wrought iron railings all the way along the top of this wall. You can see all the little stubs left in there. And that was all done for the war effort when we were looking for metal, and obviously we couldn't import metal, so we just had to recycle whatever was available to help the war effort, to build the tanks and so on, to fight the Second World War. And they were never put back, you know. I don't think they're necessarily needed, but there are a few in there.
I feel like this is pretty cool. Like where he said a lot of people like don't like the bricks. I do see that aspect of character inside of the bricks that he's talking about, and he loves the bricks because he grew up in an area, right, where that was what he saw, those bricks. And I feel like I don't live in London. I don't live in the UK. There's never been war on American territory that has directly affected me, and so the German Blitz, when they destroyed so many buildings, when they dropped all of those bombs, but then you build them back up, and you got to build them like they got to get built quickly, I'm sure. So in a lot of them you use these bricks, and these bricks you can make fast, and these bricks just have a kind of a character of resilience, if you ask me, of like, hey, like we've been through the worst of it and came out on the other side, and we still managed to build and continue to build. Like that's what they say to me, kind of from what he said so far, and I think that's really amazing. That just shows to me the UK, London's resilience, if you ask me.
Russell Square, and all these buildings here built of yellow stocks. They've tried to make them nicer there by adding embellishments, bits of stone around them, but you can see predominantly they're yellow stocks. And once again, down here we have a large area, and this is where they dug all the clay out to build those houses, and rather than building on it as they did with many other places, they just built on bits where they dug the clay out. But here they've decided to just leave it, and this would have been Lord Russell. It's now just the lovely gardens, which is very tranquil, very nice. And they close these, they've got gates on them. It seems to be the way in London. There's a rich bloke. If you're rich, you get a statue. So here's a great example of what I was talking about with the bomb damage. You see what they've put back here. They've made no effort at all to blend it in. What a shame. Although I'm doing a thing on bricks
That is nice.
And Yellow London stock specifically today. I don't think we can ignore this building as we're here in Russell Square. This is just a superb bit of work, isn't it? How ambitious is that? All those lovely little arches there, all that stonework.
Wow.
Fitzroy Hotel. Just so I go in there and just ask them how much for a room for the night. And you can get, if you book early and you want to go midweek, 460 quid for the night.
I don't know if it's that gorgeous. It is gorgeous. It is beautiful. 460. 460. Nah, can't do that. Can't do that. That's for the rich. That's for the rich.
Which, quite honestly, I think, well, that's a huge amount of money to have a hotel room for the night. But in London, I'm told these days that if you want to stay in somewhere a bit swanky like that, that's a fairly standard rate.
That's
it
crazy.
Don't come a lot cheaper than that.
That's crazy.
And you can, I'm only talking about the Queen room there, you can pay a hell of a lot more than that. So brick making in London with those clamps smouldering away for weeks on end with green wood and coal and all sorts of other stuff. It got on people's nerves. In the end, there were a few court cases fought over it and sometimes lost because the builders needed to make the bricks, obviously, to build the houses. So it was really NIMBYs saying, you know, now I've got my house, I don't want you making bricks in my backyard, go elsewhere. Eventually they did. They made it illegal to make bricks in London. And so what we ended up with is bricks being brought in from outside and other building materials like stoneworks, which added a lot of variety to London. And the only reason that this was possible was because of the advent of the canals and the railway networks, which were bringing bricks in from all over the place, from Sussex, from the Kent Weald, from Essex, from Bedfordshire, and even as far up as Birmingham, coming down on the Grand Union canals. Everything changed. So the yellow stocks had had their day, but now of course they make yellow stocks. When they're building buildings, they try to replicate it and they try to make a copy of it, and they're just not the same. Basically, they're good bricks, nothing wrong with them, but they just don't have the imperfections. Still yellow stocks here in this bit, but as you can see,
you gotta have those imperfections. My favorite rapper, Crooked Smile, you gotta have it right. You can't. You can't just recreate it, right? It's not the same. It's not
embellished with all kinds of other fancy looking brickwork, and they call this a new square, but now it's not new obviously, but it was new at the time. And what we've got here is the legal quarter. We've got the chambers, we've got the solicitors, the barristers, and all the paraphernalia that goes with the High Court, which is just down the road. Oh dear, it looks like I've missed lunch. Never mind, they might have some scraps left over for a poor builder, if there is such a thing. What a fantastic building.
Gorgeous.
My goodness. There's a bit of brickwork.
God.
Doesn't get much better than that, does it? All to do with money. God, these places are so fantastic, really, aren't they? I mean, here you are in the heart of London, all the tourists running around to see Buckingham Palace, Tower of London, Tower Bridge, and completely missing all these tranquil little spots full of history, full of architecture. Okay, so I'm halfway through my little Yellow Brick Road tour. I'm going to go get a little bit of lunch. And this is one of my favourite pubs in London. I absolutely love a London pub, especially one with so much character as this. This is the Old Bank of England.
I think everybody loves these pubs out here in the UK. Everybody loves the pubs. I want to experience pub culture. I want to get that feeling, get that experience under my belt. I'd like it.
There's a lot to be considered when you start working on bricks. It takes a lot of experience and expertise to work out the right materials to use when you're doing this kind of renovation work like they are here. And much of that experience, much of that skill actually came from the Netherlands, the Low Countries, Flanders and so on. After the Great Fire in London, they decided that they weren't going to build any more buildings from flammable materials. So that meant that a lot of it had to be built in brick. And there was a real shortage of bricklayers. They had plenty of carpenters, but they didn't have many bricklayers. And so bricklayers came from all over the place to join the happy throng and obviously make some money. The age-old motivator. You can see here on this little
Age-old
repair that
multi-layer.
they have got use of yellow London stocks, a genuine item, and they've repointed it in a bit of strong sand and cement. And they haven't made a particularly nice job of it because the rest of it has got this nice bit of pointing, and then suddenly you've got these great thick beds here, and you can see the beds suddenly get a lot thicker, don't you? So it's a bit of a shame that, but there you go, that'll weather in another 100 years, nobody will notice. So another thing that's worth mentioning is that when these bricks were made in the clamps, the quality was inconsistent. They got sometimes up to 30% of rejects out of a clamp. So that's a lot of bricks when you consider that a clamp may be 60,000 up to 250,000 bricks. That's a lot of rejects, isn't it? And what did they do with those rejects? Well, some of them they crushed up and used in the foundations just to build off, and some of them they tended to use in internal walls. And these bricks were graded by skilled guys who would say, these are first grade bricks, these are okay. They could almost tell by tapping them with a trowel whether they were going to stand the test of time. They would go on the front of the buildings at a premium, and the rest of them would go to the sides of the building or even the backs of the building and the internal walls. And that way they used as many bricks as they could. But another way that they found to make use of the bricks was when they had
my question is, if you guys know the answer, were building with bricks like the cheapest way to rebuild? Was it cheaper than, like, say, building with wood or anything else? Was bricks were bricks the cheapest way of, like, building these buildings when they were using these and being able to quickly produce these bricks?
Premium grade brick, they would often snap the headers. Now, if you look at an English bond, you'll see that in a solid 9-inch wall, you've got stretchers going long ways, and then the next course are headers going the other way. And the idea of that is that those bricks turn the other way will tie the wall together. But because they wanted to get the maximum use out of those bricks, if they got a good first quality brick, they would snap the brick in half so that they got two headers out of one brick, and on the inside they would put a lesser quality brick, reject or a second or whatever you like to call it, and that way they got better use out of the premium quality bricks. But there was a problem there, and the problem was that you can see by the way the bricks are bonded together using those stretchers and those headers in alternate courses, that it ties the wall together. And when you snap those headers, you've no longer got a tie between the internal and the external skin. And that means that the wall is going to bulge. They overcame that. Sometimes you've got a bulging wall and they could see it early and they could put a few wall ties in to hold the wall together. But other times it resulted in a collapse. If you buy a house today that's a few hundred years old, made of these bricks, or any other bricks come to that, you've got no way of knowing whether they've used a load of snapped headers on there or whether they've actually done the honourable thing and tied them through. If they were sensible, they would have kept a few of those headers intact to tie the wall together. So it wouldn't matter if, say, 1 in every 4 headers was a whole one, and that would be enough to tie the wall together. But if you get too greedy, then you do end up with a wall that's not tied at all, and that can result in a sudden and catastrophic collapse, as they say. When you look at this wall, you can see that it's had a little bit of a dip over the time, and the mortar, being sand and lime, has just kind of taken that dip. And you can see a bit of a wavy line there where it's gone up and down, but it hasn't actually cracked the bricks. It hasn't done any damage really to the building. There may be a floor in there that was a little bit out of kilter that they had to sort out, but generally speaking, these buildings are extremely durable. Several hundred years old. In this case, this one was built in 1814. That's doing very well indeed, and I reckon it's going to last another 100, 200, even 300 years without too much trouble. Now, even though these bricks are dirty, they've actually withstood the pollution and the grime of London incredibly well over the years, more so than stone. Stone very often proved to be very susceptible to acid rain. So when you had all the coal fires burning in London and you had extremely acidic rain, it would end up eating the stone away alarmingly quickly. I mean, we may be talking as little as 30, 40 years before it started pitting, and 100 years before it was completely decayed to the point where it needed replacing. Whereas these bricks, they just kept getting better with time. Now you can see that the bricks that they've used here in the soldier course along the top and also the mullions down the side, they're red rubbers, and look how badly they have eroded over the years compared to the good old, what we might have called inferior London stocks. They obviously put those red rubbers there to give the building a little bit of distinction, a little bit of class.
Yeah.
Did it work? Not really. Tended to be a lot.
Nah. I'd rather them just be those black bricks. I prefer that than just added like the red ones right around the windows. I'm not a big fan of it. Not a big
Worse in the
fan
end.
of it at
Now I
all.
know this is about brickwork, but I can't help but mention these little things which you find all over the place on these lead pipes. And what they are is rodding access. So where you've got a pipe, it's actually a rainwater pipe going all the way up to the top, to that head, all the way down. If they got blocked up, they could open the plug up and they could put something down there to clear the pipe. Clever idea. So in the end, the red bricks started to come into London thanks to the railways and the canals, and the red bricks were an invasive species if ever there was one. And happily they haven't overtaken completely. Even modern buildings very often are built in yellow stocks just to keep the look. But if you dare to venture out into the suburbs, you will see red bricks laid in uniform, boring rows, lacking in character, I would say, except of course for some notable exceptions. There are nice red brick buildings around, of course there are. Hampton Court Palace would be one, and I will be visiting there to have a look at the beautiful Tudor brickwork in Hampton Court Palace in one of our future videos. So if you'd like to see that, keep tuned and do subscribe to the channel. And by the way, if you've got something interesting you'd like to show us in your hometown, get in touch, because I'd love to have a walk around with you and you can show skill builders just what there is to like about buildings in your town.
That was cool. Definitely enjoyed reacting to that video. I think they were all, it was pretty awesome getting to learn about the history just of the bricks and why certain buildings in London were built like that. After he explained it to me, I think I do rock with the black bricks. I think they do add that character. I kind of told you guys in the middle of that video what I thought about them. So now, let me hear what you guys think. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up. Check out the next one. I'll see you guys next time.